Drive on a Secret Trail by Enid Blyton. Part 1. "Mother!" shouted George, rushing into the house. "Mother, where are you?" "Dear me, George, whatever is the matter?" said her mother in alarm. "Mother, Timmy's hurt," said George. "Look." She knelt down by the dog and gently pulled forward one ear. Behind it was a small cut. "Now don't be silly, George," said her mother. "It's only a small cut." "How did he do it?" "He tried to jump over a ditch and he didn't see some old barbed wire there," said George. "A rusty piece caught his ear and ripped that awful cut. I can't stop it bleeding." Her mother looked at it and said, "Perhaps it ought to be stitched. Take him to the vet. Poor old Timmy." "I'll go at once," said George, getting up. "Will he be in?" "Oh, yes, it's his surgery hour," said her mother. So Timmy was hurried along the country lanes to the pretty little house where the vet lived. George, very anxious indeed, was most relieved to see that the vet seemed quite unconcerned. "A couple of stitches and that cut will heal well," he said. "Hold him, will you, while I do the job? He'll hardly feel it." In 5 minutes' time, George was thanking the vet wholeheartedly. "Thank you. I was worried. Will he be all right now?" "Good gracious, yes. But you mustn't let him scratch that wound," said the vet, washing his hands. "But how can I stop him?" asked George anxiously. "Look, he's trying to scratch it now." "Well, you must make him a big cardboard collar," said the vet, "one that sticks out right round his neck, so that his paw can't get near that cut, however much he tries to reach it." "But Timmy won't like that a bit," said George. "Well, it's the only way of stopping him from scratching that wound," said the vet. George went home with Timmy. He padded along quietly, pleased at the fuss that George was making of him. When he was nearly home, he suddenly sat down and put up his hind leg to scratch his bad ear. "No, Timmy, no!" cried George in alarm. "You must not scratch. You'll break the stitches." Timmy looked up in surprise. Very well. If scratching was suddenly upsetting George, he would wait till he was alone. But George could read Timmy's thoughts as easily as he could read hers. She frowned. "Blow! I'll have to make him that cardboard collar. Perhaps Mother will help me." Her mother was quite willing to help. George was not good at things of that sort, and she watched her mother cutting out a big cardboard collar, fitting it round the surprised Timmy's head, and then lacing the edges together with thread so that he could not get it off. Timmy was most surprised, but he stood very patiently. As soon as the collar was finished and safely round his neck, he walked away. Then he raised his hind leg to scratch at his smarting ear. But of course he couldn't get it over the collar and merely scratched the cardboard. "Never mind, Timmy," said George. "It will only be for a few days." The study door nearby opened and her father came out. He saw Timmy in his collar and stopped in surprise. Then he roared with laughter. "Hey, Timmy, you look like Queen Elizabeth I in a fine big ruff," he said. "Don't laugh at him, father," said George. "You know that dogs can't bear being laughed at." Timmy certainly looked offended. He turned his back on George's father and stalked off to the kitchen. A little squeal of laughter came through the door. "Oh, Timmy, whatever have you got that collar on for?" said the cook's voice. "You do look peculiar." George was angry. She remained angry all that day and made everyone most uncomfortable. How mean of people to jeer at poor Timmy. Didn't they realize how terribly uncomfortable a collar like that was? She mooned about, looking so angry and miserable that her mother felt worried. "George, dear, don't be silly about this. Timmy will have to wear that collar for at least a week." "Everybody laughs at him," said George in an angry voice. "He went into the garden and a lot of kids hung over the wall and laughed like anything, and father thinks it's funny, and—" "Now, George, don't get into one of your moods," said her mother. George bore it for one day more. Then, after 2 upsets with her father over Timmy, another with a couple of boys who laughed at him, and one with the paper boy, she decided she wouldn't stay at Kirin Cottage for 1 day longer. "We'll take my little tent and go off by ourselves somewhere," she told Timmy. "Some place where nobody can see you till your ear is better and that hateful collar is off. We'll go to that lonely little spot on the common and pitch our tent near the little stream. We can go tonight. I'll take my bike and strap everything onto the back." So, in the middle of the night, when Kirin Cottage was dark and quiet, George stole downstairs with Timmy. She left a note on the dining-room table and then went to get her bicycle. She strapped her little tent on it and the bag containing food and other odds and ends. "Come on," she whispered to Timmy, "and don't bark, for goodness' sake." They disappeared into the darkness, Timmy running like a black shadow beside the bicycle. Joan, the cook, found George's note in the morning. She ran straight up to George's room and looked inside. The bed was empty. There was no George and no Timmy. Joan went downstairs and gave the note to Mrs. Kirin. "Oh, dear, how silly George is," said Mrs. Kirin when she had read it. "Look, Quentin, such a fuss about Timmy. Now George has gone off with him, goodness knows where." Her husband took the note and read it out loud. "Dear Mother, I'm going off for a few days with Timmy till his ear is better. I've taken my tent and a few things. Don't worry, please. Tell Anne, if she wants to join me, to come to the end of Carter's Lane on the common, and I will show her where I'm camping. Tell her to come at 12. Love, from George." "All right," said George's father. "Let her stay away if she wants to. I'm tired of her sulky face and Timmy's hang-dog look. Tell Anne to join George, and maybe I shall have peace for a few days." "George should be all right," said his wife. "She's quite sensible, really, and she's got Timmy. I'll tell Anne to join her when she arrives this morning." When Anne arrived at Kirin Station, Aunt Fanny was there to meet her. She told Anne about Timmy's ear and the big collar of cardboard that had caused all the trouble. Anne couldn't help smiling. "George is quite crazy about old Tim," she said. "I'll go and meet her at 12, and of course I'll camp with her for a day or two. It's lovely weather, and I'd like to." "How are Julian and Dick?" asked her aunt. She was very fond of Anne's 2 brothers, George's cousins. "Will they be coming here at all these holidays?" "I don't know," said Anne. "They're still in France, you know, on a schoolboy's tour. I feel funny without them. George will be cross to hear they probably won't be coming to Kirin." At 12 o'clock Anne was standing patiently at the end of Carter's Lane. It ran to the common and then ended in a small winding path that led to nowhere in particular. Big gorse bushes grew here and there, and slender birch trees. Anne, her belongings strapped to her back and a bag in her hand, looked over the common to see if she could spy George. She hadn't been there for more than a minute when she heard a hissing sound. "Psst!" The sound came from the other side of a big gorse bush, and Anne walked round it. Half hidden under a prickly branch were George and Timmy. George scrambled out of the bush. "I hid here just in case Father or Mother should come with you and try and make me come back," she said. "I'm glad you've come, Anne." "I wouldn't stay alone at Kirin Cottage while you were camping out," said Anne. "Besides, I understand how you feel about Timmy." "Let's go," said George. "I've got a lovely camping place. You'll like it. It's near a little spring, so there's plenty of water. Did you bring any more food? I didn't really bring much." "Yes, I've brought heaps," said Anne. "Aunt Fanny made me. She's not cross with you, George. I didn't see your father. He was shut up in his study." George's spirits suddenly rose. "This is going to be fun. Timmy's ear will soon be better, and he loves camping out as much as we do. I've really found a good place, about the loneliest on the common. Nobody near us for miles." They set off together, Timmy at their heels. "When are Julian and Dick coming down?" asked George. "They may not be coming down at all, these holes," said Anne, and George's face fell at once. She stopped and stared at Anne in dismay. "Not coming? But they always come in the holes, or we always go away somewhere together," she said. "Well, they're still in France on a tour or something," said Anne. George felt miserable. The holidays stretched before her, suddenly seeming long and dreary. Her 2 boy cousins were always such fun. They had such wonderful adventures together, and now they weren't coming. "Are we getting near this place of yours, George?" said Anne. "It's a jolly long way." "We go up this hill in front of us and then drop down to a little copse," said George. "There's a funny old cottage nearby, quite ruined and empty." They walked up the little hill and down again, following curving rabbit paths. "Look," said George, "you can see part of the old cottage now. My camp is fairly near there." They were soon at George's rough little camping site. Her tent was up, and she had made a bed inside out of springy heather. A mug, a bag of dog biscuits, a few tins and a loaf of bread were at one end of the tent. It didn't seem to Anne as if George had brought very much, and she felt glad that she had managed to pack such a lot of things. "Aunt Fanny cut dozens and dozens of sandwiches," she said. "I'm hungry. Shall we have some now?" They sat out in the sun, munching the ham sandwiches. Timmy had to make do with a handful of dog biscuits. After a bit he got up and wandered off. "Where's he going?" asked Anne. "To look for a rabbit?" "No, probably to get a drink," said George. "The spring is in the direction he's gone. I'm thirsty too. Let's take the mug and get a drink ourselves." They went off with the mug, Anne following George through the thick heather. The little spring was a lovely one. It had evidently been used by the people who had once lived in the old cottage, and was built round with big white stones, so that the spring ran through a little stony channel, as clear as crystal. "It's as cold as ice," said Anne. "Simply delicious." When they came back from the spring, they lay on the heather out in the sun talking. Timmy wandered off by himself again. "So peaceful here," said Anne. "Nobody near us for miles, just the birds and the rabbits. This is what I like." "There's hardly a sound," said George, yawning. And then, just as she had said that, there came a noise in the distance, a sharp sound like metal on stone. It came again, and then stopped. "What's that, do you suppose?" said George, sitting up. "I can't imagine," said Anne. "It's a long way away. Everything is so still that sound carries from quite a distance." The sharp noises began again in a little while, and then stopped. The girls shut their eyes and slept. There wasn't a sound now except the pop, pop, pop of gorse pods exploding in the sun and sending out their little black seeds. George woke up when Timmy came back. He sat down heavily on her feet, and she woke up with a jump. "Timmy," she said, "get off my feet, you silly dog." Timmy obligingly removed himself, and then picked up something he had dropped, lay down and began gnawing it. George looked to see what it was. "Timmy, that's a bone." "Where did you get it?" she cried. "Anne, Timmy's found a bone, and it's a bone that has had cooked meat on it. So it's not a rabbit or anything Timmy's caught." "Do you suppose anyone else is camping near us?" asked Anne. "After all, bones don't grow in the heather." "That's quite a good meaty one too." "It's rather an old one though," said George. "Ooh, it's smelly. Go away, Tim. Take it further off." The sharp metallic noises suddenly began again, and George frowned. "I believe there is someone camping near us, Anne. Come on, let's do a bit of exploring." The two girls, with Timmy at their heels, set off in the hot sun. Anne caught sight of the ruined cottage that George had told her about. "Let's have a look at that first," she said. "It must be awfully old." They went in at the wide doorway. There was no door left, only the stone archway. Inside was a big room whose floor had once been paved with slabs of white stone. Now grass and other weeds had grown between the cracks, and had actually lifted up some of the slabs so that the whole floor was uneven. Here and there parts of the walls had fallen away, and the daylight came through. One window was still more or less intact, but the others had fallen out. A small crooked stairway of stone led upwards in one corner. "Here's another doorway," said Anne, "leading into a second room, a small one. It's got an old sink in it, look. And this must be the remains of a pump." "There's not much to see, really," said George, looking round. "The top rooms must be quite ruined, because half the roof is off. Hello, here's another door, a back door." "There are outhouses here, or the remains of them," said Anne, exploring the backyard. "They must have kept pigs and hens and ducks. Here's a dried-up pond, look." Everything was falling to pieces. The best preserved corner of the old place was what must have been a small stable. Rusted mangers were still there, and the floor was of stone. An old piece of harness hung on a big nail. "It's got quite a nice feel about it, this old place," said Anne. "I can almost hear hens clucking and ducks quacking." "Quack, quack, quack, quack." Anne clutched George, and the two girls looked extremely startled to hear the sudden loud noise of quacking. They stood and listened. "What was it?" said Anne. "It sounded like ducks, but there aren't any here, surely. We shall hear a horse whinnying next." They didn't hear a whinny, but they heard the snorting of a horse at once. Both girls were now quite alarmed. They looked round for Timmy, but he was nowhere to be seen. "This is silly," said George. "Are we imagining things? And there must be hens somewhere around. Let's go round to the back of the stables and look. Timmy, where are you? Timmy!" Timmy appeared, looking rather sheepish. He wagged his tail, and the girls saw to their amazement that he had a ribbon tied on it, a bright blue one at that. Timmy went over to George, and she unfastened the ribbon from his tail. "Who tied this on you?" she demanded. "Timmy, where have you been?" The two girls searched the old buildings thoroughly, but found nobody. They stared at one another in bewilderment. "Where did Timmy get that silly ribbon?" said George, exasperated. "Someone must have tied it on. Perhaps it was a hiker passing by. Perhaps he heard us here and saw Timmy and played a joke," said Anne. "But it's strange that old Tim let him tie the ribbon on. I mean, Tim is not over friendly with strangers, is he?" The girls gave up the idea of exploring any further and went back to their little camp. Timmy went with them. He lay down and then suddenly got up again, making for a thick gorse bush which he tried to squirm underneath. "Now what's he after?" said George. Timmy backed out reluctantly, his collar all crooked. After him came a peculiar little mongrel dog, with one blind eye and one exceedingly bright and lively one. He was half white and half black, and had a ridiculously long thin tail, which he waved about merrily. "Well," said George, amazed, "what's that dog doing here? And how did Timmy get so friendly with him?" "Woof!" said Timmy, and brought the mongrel dog over to Anne and George. "This is all very peculiar," said Anne. "I shall expect to see Timmy bring a cat to us next." At once there came a pathetic mewing. "Meow, meow, meow." George got up and marched over to the bush. "If there's a cat there, it won't have much chance against two dogs," she called to Anne, and began to crawl into the bare hollow space under the big gorse bush. She looked into it, not able to see anything at first, because it was dark there after the bright sunlight. Then she got a tremendous shock. A round grinning face stared back at her, a face with very bright eyes and tousled hair fawning onto the forehead. The mouth was set in a wide smile, showing very white teeth. "Meow, meow," said the face. George scrambled back at top speed, her heart thumping. "What is it?" called Anne. "There's somebody hiding there," said George. "Not a cat, a fathead of a boy. It's him who's doing the mewing." "Come out," called Anne. "Come out and let's see you." There was a scrambling noise, and a boy came head foremost from the hollow space under the bush. He was about 12 or 13, short, sturdily built, and with the cheekiest face Anne had ever seen. Timmy rushed at him and licked him lovingly. George stared in amazement. "How does my dog know you?" she demanded. "Well, he came growling at me yesterday when I was in my own camp," said the boy, "and I offered him a nice meaty bone. Then he saw my little dog Jet and made friends with him. He's a nice dog, yours. He feels a bit of an idiot wearing that collar, doesn't he? You should have heard Jet laugh when he first saw it." George frowned. "I came here to be alone so that Timmy shouldn't be jeered at," she said. "He's got a bad ear. I suppose you were the fathead who tied a blue ribbon on his tail." "Just for a joke," said the boy. "Your Timmy didn't mind a bit. I wanted to find out who owned him, because, like you, I don't like strangers messing about when I'm camping out, so I came along." "I see," said Anne. "And you did all the clucking and quacking and harumping, I suppose." She liked this idiot of a boy with his broad, friendly grin. "What are you doing? Just camping or hiking or botanizing?" "I'm digging," said the boy. "My father's an archaeologist. He loves old buildings more than anything else in the world. I take after him, I suppose. There was once an old Roman camp on this common, and I've found a place where part of it must have been, so I'm digging for anything I can find, pottery, weapons, anything like that." "We'll come and see it," said Anne, excited. "No, don't," said the boy. "I don't like people messing round me when I'm doing something serious. Please don't come. I won't bother you again, I promise." "All right, we won't come," said Anne, quite understanding. "But don't you play any more silly tricks on us." "I promise," said the boy. "I won't come near you again. I only wanted to see whose dog this was." And, whistling to Jet, he set off at a furious pace. "What a peculiar boy," said George. It was now tea time, so they had tea, biscuits, a sandwich each, and a bar of rather soft chocolate. George examined Timmy's ear for the 100th time that day, and pronounced it very much better. "What shall we do now, Anne?" she said. "Go for a walk?" "Yes," said Anne. "Good idea." They had a lovely walk and sat down halfway to watch hordes of rabbits playing together. They watched for a long time and then got up to go back to the camp when it began to grow dark. When they came near, they heard the sound of low whistling. They came round a big gorse bush and almost bumped into a boy. "Why, it's you," said George in surprise. "What are you doing here? You said you wouldn't come near us." The boy stared, looking very surprised. His tousled hair fell right across his forehead and he brushed it back. "I said nothing of the sort," he said. "You did?" said Anne. "You know you did." "Well, if you break your promise, there's no reason for us to keep ours. We shall come and visit your camp." "I never made you any promise," said the boy, looking quite startled. "You're mad." "Don't be an idiot," said George, getting cross. "I suppose you'll be saying next that you didn't act like a hen and a duck and a horse this afternoon." "Balmy," said the boy, looking at them pityingly. "Quite balmy." "Are you coming here again?" demanded George. "If I want to," said the boy. "The water in this spring is better than in the one over there by my camp." "Then we shall come and explore your camp," said George firmly. "If you don't keep your promise, we shan't keep ours." "By all means come if you want to," said the boy. "You seem quite mad, but I dare say you're harmless. But don't bring your dog. He might eat mine." "You know he wouldn't eat Jet," said Anne. "They're good friends." "I don't know anything of the sort," said the boy, and off he went, brushing his hair out of his eyes again. "What do you make of that?" said George, staring after him. "Not a bit the same as he was this afternoon. Do you think he really had forgotten about his promise and everything?" "I don't know," said Anne, puzzled. "He was so perky and jolly and full of fun before, grinning all the time, but just now he seemed quite serious, not a smile in him." "Oh, well, perhaps he's a bit crazy," said George. "Are you sleepy, Anne?" "Yes," said Anne. "I don't think I'll sleep in the tent, George. You'll want Timmy with you, and honestly there's so little room inside the tent that I'm quite sure Timmy would lie on my legs all night long." "I'll sleep in the open air as well," said George. "Let's get some heather and make a kind of mattress of it. We can put a rug on top of it and lie on that." The two of them pulled a lot of heather and carried it to their bed. Soon they had a fine pile. They laid the rug on the heather pile and George lay down on it. The bed sank a little beneath her weight. "Very comfortable," she said. "Shall we need a rug over us, Anne?" "Well, I did bring one," said Anne, "but I don't think we'll want it. The night's so hot." "Don't the stars look big and bright? They make me feel very small. They're such millions of miles away." There was no answer. George was fast asleep. Her hand fell down the side of the heather and rested on the ground below. The night darkened. There was no moon, but the stars shone out well from the midnight sky. It was very quiet out there on the common, far away from streets and villages and towns. Not even an owl hooted. Anne didn't quite know why she awoke. At first she had no idea where she was, and she lay gazing up at the stars in astonishment, thinking she must still be asleep. She suddenly felt very thirsty. She got up quietly and set off for the little spring. Its tinkling, gurgling sound guided her as soon as she heard it. She sat down on one of the stones nearby and held out her cupped hands. How very cold the water was, and how delicious to drink on this hot night. She got up to go back, and walked a few steps in the starlight. Then she stopped. Was she going in the right direction? I think I am, she decided, and went on, carefully and quietly. Surely she must be near their little camp now. Then all at once she stood still and felt herself stiffen. She had suddenly seen a light. It had flashed and disappeared. Ah! There it was again. Then, as her eyes strained through the starlit darkness, she suddenly saw that she had taken the wrong way. She had gone in the direction of the old ruined cottage, and not the camp, and the light had come from there. She didn't dare go any nearer. Now she could hear sounds, whispering sounds, and the noise of a footfall on the stone floor of the cottage, and then the flash of a light came again. Anne began to breathe fast. She must go back to George and to Timmy's protection. As fast and as silently as she could, she found her way back to the spring, and then, almost stumbling now, made her way to where George was still lying peacefully asleep. "George," she whispered, "George, do wake up. I've something strange to tell you." "Whatever is it, Anne?" said George, her voice sounding loud in the night. "Shh!" said Anne. "Why, we're all alone here," said George, surprised. "We can make as much noise as we like." "George, do listen. There's someone in that old cottage," said Anne. George sat up at once. Anne told her the whole story, though it didn't really seem very much of a tale when she related it. George spoke to Timmy. "Tim," she said, keeping her voice low, "we'll go and do a little exploring, shall we? Come on, and keep quiet." They took the path that led to the old cottage. George had Timmy well to heel. He knew he must not push forward unless told to. His ears were pricked now, and he was listening hard. They came cautiously to the cottage. They could see its dark outline in the starlight, but little else. There was no light flashing there, nor did there seem to be any noises at all. All three stood still and quiet for about 5 minutes. "I don't think there's a soul here," whispered George into Anne's ear. "They must have gone, unless you dreamed it all, Anne." "I didn't," whispered back Anne indignantly. "Let's go forward a bit and send Timmy into the cottage. He'll soon bark if there's anyone there." George gave Timmy a little shove. "Go on then," she said. "Find, Timmy, find." Timmy gladly shot forward into the darkness. He trotted into the cottage. The two girls stood and listened, their heartbeats sounding very loud to them. There was not a sound to be heard. "There can't be anyone there," said George at last, "or else Timmy would have sniffed them out." "I know there was someone there," said Anne. "In fact, more than one person, because I'm sure I heard whispering." George raised her voice. "Timmy!" she called loudly, making Anne jump violently. "Timmy! Come along, we've sent you on a silly wild goose chase." Timmy came trotting out of the cottage and went obediently to George. "Anne had a bad dream, that's all, Timmy," she said. Anne felt very cross. She said no more, and they left the old cottage and went back to their heather bed. Anne climbed onto her side and turned over with her back to George. All right, let George think it was a dream if she liked. Five on a Secret Trail by Enid Blyton. Part 2. when Anne awoke in the morning and remembered the happenings of the night before, she too began to wonder uneasily if she had dreamed what she had seen and heard in the old cottage. "Let's go and see that boy in his camp," George said, when they had eaten a few rather stale sandwiches and some shortbread biscuits. "I'm beginning to feel bored, aren't you? I wish Timmy's ear would heal up. I'd go back home like a shot then." They set off in the direction of the camp with Timmy. They heard a chip-chipping noise as they came near, and then something small and hairy shot out from a bush and rushed up, barking a welcome. "Hello, Jet," said Anne. "Don't you let Timmy have any more of your bones." The chipping noise had stopped. The two girls went on and came to a very messy piece of common. It had been well dug over, in some places very deeply. Surely that boy couldn't have done so much excavating by himself. "Hey!" George called very loudly. "Where are you?" And then George saw the boy below her examining something in a trench he had dug out. He jumped and looked upwards. Then he scowled. "You promised not to come and disturb me," he shouted. "Well, I like that," said George, amazed. "Who came messing round our camp yesterday evening, I'd like to know?" "Not me," said the boy. "I always keep my promises. Now go away." "Well, I can't say we think much of you," said George, disgusted. "We're going. We don't want to see anything of your silly digging. Goodbye." "Goodbye and good riddance," called the boy rudely, and turned back to his work. "I think he must be quite mad," said Anne. "First he makes a promise, then last evening he broke his promise and even said he hadn't made one, and now today he says he did make a promise and that he'd kept his and we'd broken ours." They went up a little rabbit path and into a small copse of birch trees. Someone was sitting there, reading. He looked up as they came. The two girls stopped in amazement. It was that boy again. But how had he got here? They had just left him behind in the trench. "Another little trick of yours, I suppose," said George, sarcastically, stopping in front of him. "You must be a jolly good runner, I must say, to have got here so quickly." "Good gracious, it's those potty girls again," groaned the boy. "Can't you leave me alone?" "How did you get here so quickly?" said Anne, puzzled. "I didn't get here quickly. I came very slowly, reading my book as I went," said the boy. "Fibber," said George. "You must have run at top speed. Why do you pretend like this? It's only a minute or so ago that we saw you. Now you're the fibber," said the boy. "Do go away and leave me alone." Anne pulled at George's sleeve. "Come on," she said. "It's no good staying here arguing. The boy's crazy. We'll never get any sense out of him." The day passed quickly. They saw no more of the puzzling boy or of Jet. They occasionally heard the sharp noise of metal on stone or of chipping from the place where the boy was presumably still digging in the old Roman camp. They settled down on their heather bed that night, but saw no stars twinkling above them this time. Instead, there were rather heavy clouds, and it was not nearly so warm. "Gosh, I hope it's not going to rain," said George. "Our tent wouldn't be much good against a real downpour. It's not waterproof." "Well," said Anne sleepily, "I'm not getting up till I have to. Oh, I'm tired." She was soon asleep, and so was George, but not for long. There was indeed a storm coming up. The rain came closer, and soon large drops, the size of 10-penny pieces, peppered the faces of the two sleeping girls. Then came such a crash of thunder that they both awoke in a fright. "It's a thunderstorm," said George. "We shall be soaked. There's nothing for it but to get into the cottage. At least we'll have a roof over our heads. Come on." The girls grabbed their rug and ran through the rain, George flashing her torch to guide them and Timmy close behind. They came to the doorway of the cottage and went inside. What a relief to get out of that rain! They huddled down into a corner with the rug round them. The storm passed overhead with a few terrific crashes and much lightning. Gradually the rain grew less and soon stopped. One star came out and then others, followed as the thunderclouds swept away in the wind. "We can't go back to the tent, it'll be soaked," said George. "I'll go and get our bags for pillows. We can lie on the rug." Anne went with her, and carried a bag back too. Soon the girls were lying in a corner on the rug, their heads on the bags and Timmy close beside them. "Good night," said Anne. "We'll try to go to sleep again. Blow that storm." Soon they were both asleep, but Timmy wasn't. Timmy was uneasy, very uneasy, and quite suddenly he broke into a volley of such loud barks that both girls woke up in a panic. "Timmy, what's the matter?" said George. "What is it?" asked Anne in a scared whisper. "I don't know. I can't even imagine," said George, also in a low voice. "Perhaps it's nothing, just the thunderstorm that has upset him and made him nervous. We'll keep awake a bit and see if we can hear anything." They lay quietly in their corner, and George kept a firm hand on Timmy. He growled once or twice, but did not bark any more. George began to think it really must have been the storm that had upset him. A rumble of thunder came again. The storm was returning, or else another one was blowing up. George felt relieved. "It's all right, Anne. It must have been the thunder and lightning in the distance that upset Timmy." Timmy barked angrily. "Be quiet," said George crossly. "Now you can't go into the rain, Timmy. It's begun again, as bad as before. You'd get dripping wet." "Anne, where are you going?" "Just to look out of the window," said Anne. "I like to see the countryside suddenly lit up for just one moment in a lightning flash." She went to stand at the window. There came the crash of thunder not far away and a brilliant flash of lightning. Anne stared over the countryside, which had suddenly become visible in the flash and then disappeared like magic in a second. She gave a sudden cry and stumbled back to George. "There's someone out there," she gasped, clutching George and making her jump. "I saw them just for an instant when the lightning flashed." "What sort of someone?" said George, astonished. "How many?" "I think there were 2, or maybe 3. They were standing some way off, quite still, out there in the storm." "Anne, those are trees," said George scornfully. "There are 2 or 3 small trees standing against the sky out there. I noticed them the other day." "They weren't trees," said Anne. "They were people. I'm sure of it." George was absolutely certain that Anne had seen the group of little trees that she knew were there. They would look just like people in a quick flash of lightning. "Don't worry, Anne," she said. "It's the easiest thing in the world to imagine seeing things in a lightning flash. Timmy would bark if there were people around." "Well, he did bark, didn't he?" said Anne. "He woke us both up with his barking." "Oh, yes, but that was just because he heard the storm coming up again," said George. Just at that moment the thunder crashed again. Then the lightning flashed its weird and brilliant light. This time both the girls screamed, and Timmy gave an enormous bark. "There! Did you see that?" said Anne in a shaky voice. "Someone was looking in at the window, and if we saw him, he must have seen us. Whatever is he doing here in the middle of the night?" "Whoever he is," said George, "he can't possibly be up to any good. I wish the boys were here. They'd know what to do." "The storm's going off again," said Anne. "Timmy has stopped barking too, thank goodness. Don't let him go, George. You never know those people, whoever they are, might do him harm. Anyway, I feel safer when he's with us." "I wouldn't dream of letting him go," said George. It was a great relief to the 2 girls to see the silvering of the sky in the east and to know that soon the sun would be up. They immediately felt much better. George even stood up and went bravely to the window, where there was nothing to be seen but the quiet countryside with its stretches of heather, gorse bushes and silver birches. "Oh dear, now I feel sleepy all over again," said Anne. "I suppose it's because daylight is here and everything seems safe, so I know I can fall asleep." George felt the same. They cuddled down together on the rug again and immediately fell asleep. They didn't wake up till quite late, and even then something woke them, or they might have slept on for hours. They were awakened by something scuttling around them, making a very loud noise indeed. They sat up rather dazed. "Oh, it's Jet," said Anne. "Jet, have you come to see if we're all right?" A loud voice called to them. They looked up. The boy was standing at the door, grinning widely. "Hello, sleepyheads. I came to see if you were all right after that awful storm. I know I promised I wouldn't come here, but I felt a bit worried about you." "Oh,
"Well, that's nice of you," said Anne. "We're quite all right, thank you." "Wasn't it a dreadful storm?" said George. "How did you get on?" "All right. I sleep down in the trench and the rain can't get at me. Well, so long. Come on, Jet." The boy and the dog disappeared. "That was nice of him," said Anne. "He doesn't seem crazy this morning, does he? Quite normal. He didn't even contradict us." They went to their soaked tent and got a tin of sardines out to eat with bread and butter. Just as they were opening it, they heard someone whistling and looked up. "Here comes that boy again," said Anne. "Good morning. I don't want to butt in, but I just wondered if you were all right after the storm," said the boy without even a smile. The girls stared at him in amazement. "Look, don't start being crazy all over again," said George. "You know jolly well we're all right. We've already told you." "You haven't, and I didn't know," said the boy. "I only came out of politeness. Sorry to see you're still balmy." And off he went. "There," said Anne, vexed. "Just as we thought he was nice again and not crazy, he starts all over again. I suppose he thinks it's funny." They set their things out to dry in the sun and spent the rest of the morning generally tidying up and making the tent habitable again. And then, at about 12:30, just as they were thinking about having something to eat, they heard the sound of voices and Timmy went quite mad. He barked wildly and set off down the path at top speed, his tail wagging 19 to the dozen. "It can't be. Surely it can't be Julian and Dick," shouted George in sudden delight, and she shot off after Timmy. It was Julian and Dick. There they came, packs on their backs, grinning all over their faces. "We never guessed you'd come so soon," said the delighted George. "Gosh, I'm pleased to see you." "We got fed up with French food," said Dick, "and it was so hot. Next time I go there, I'll go when it's cooler." "And we kept on thinking of Kiran and the bay, and you two girls and Timmy," said Julian. "I think we really got a bit homesick, so we packed up before we should and flew home." "Flew," said George. "You lucky things. And then did you come straight down here?" "We spent the night with Mother and Dad at home," said Julian, "and then caught the first train here, only to find you weren't at Kiran." "So we packed camping out things and came straight along," said Dick. "It's lucky you found us," said George. "Nobody's supposed to know where this camp is." "I say," said Julian, "Timmy looks a scream in that collar, doesn't he? You're an Elizabethan dog with a ruff, Timmy. That's what Uncle Quentin told us." "He looks most comical, I must say," said Dick. "Enough to make a cat laugh." Anne looked at George. What would she say to hear Julian and Dick laughing at Timmy and making fun of him? But George only grinned. In fact, she gave a little laugh herself. Yes, she agreed. He does look funny, doesn't he? And he doesn't mind a bit. "Anything exciting been happening?" asked Julian. The girls looked at each other. "Well, as a matter of fact, there was something," said George, and she related all that had happened. Then Anne told Julian of the light in the old cottage and the whispers and footfalls outside. "We did think I might have been dreaming," she said, "but now we don't think I was. We think I really did see and hear those things." "This all sounds most interesting," said Julian. George told him of the storm in the night, and how they had had to leave their heather bed and go to shelter in the old cottage, and how, in the flashes of lightning, Anne had seen 2 or 3 people standing outside, and then how they had both seen someone standing silently looking in at the window. "Yes, something is definitely up," said Julian. "I wonder what. I mean, there's absolutely nothing on this lonely bit of common that's at all interesting." "Well, there are the remains of an old Roman camp," said Anne, "and a boy there who is examining them to see if he can find anything old and interesting." "A completely mad boy," said George. "He doesn't seem to know what he says or doesn't say, contradicts himself all the time." "And," said Anne, "he apparently thinks it's awfully funny to meet us somewhere and then double round on his tracks and appear suddenly somewhere else. He's got a little one-eyed dog called Jet," said George. "This all sounds most interesting," said Julian. "A one-eyed dog, a mad boy, Roman remains, and people who come to an old ruined cottage in the dead of night and look into windows. The first thing to do is to have a look at the Roman remains and the mad boy. I'm looking forward to meeting him, I must say. We'd better unpack first, though." "Right," said Dick. "Where should we put our things? I don't somehow like to leave everything under that little tent with a mad boy about." "We'll put everything into the old cottage," said Julian. "We'll move in properly in case it rains again tonight." They spent the next half-hour taking their things into the cottage and putting them in corners or on shelves. George found a dark corner behind the fireplace where she put the food. "Now," said Julian, "let's go and see the Roman remains and the mad boy." The five walked off together, Timmy at the back, delighted to have all his friends with him again. As they came near the old camp, they saw a boy sitting beside a bush reading. "That's the boy we told you about," said George. "See?" "He looks fairly ordinary," said Dick. As they drew near, George called to the boy, "Hello, where's Jet?" The boy looked up annoyed. "How should I know?" he said. "Well, he was with you this morning," replied George. "He was not," said the boy. "He's never with me. Please don't disturb me. I'm reading." "There you are," said George to the others. "He came to see us this morning with Jet, and now he says the little dog is never with him." "He is mad," said Dick, "or plain rude. Not worth bothering about anyway. Well, if he's not doing any excavating in his Roman camp, perhaps we can explore it without being ordered off." They walked on slowly and came to the camp, and at once heard a cheerful whistling going on and the sound of someone digging. George looked over the top of the dug-out trench in surprise. She almost toppled in, she was so amazed at what she saw. The boy was there, digging carefully, whistling as he did so. He brushed his tousled hair from his hot forehead and caught sight of George and the others. He looked rather astonished. "How on earth did you get down here so quickly?" said George. "I've been down here all afternoon," replied the boy. "Fibber," said George. The boy looked very angry and shouted back at once, "I'm tired of you two girls, and now you've brought your friends too. I suppose you think you can come and aggravate me even more." "Don't be a fathead," said Dick, feeling as puzzled about this boy as George and Anne had been. How in the world had he run around them and got down in the trench so quickly? Did he enjoy playing tricks like that? He really didn't look mad. "Is this your property, this old camp?" asked Julian. "No, of course not," said the boy. "As if I could own a whole camp like this. It was discovered by my father some time ago, and he gave me permission to work here for the holes. It's pretty exciting, I can tell you. See my finds?" He pointed to a rough shelf where stood a broken pot, something that looked like an old brooch, and part of a stone head. Julian was at once interested. He leapt down into the trench. "I say, you've certainly got something there," he said. The others jumped down after him. They looked about with interest. Evidently the place had been well excavated by experts, and now the boy was working here and there on his own, hoping to find something that had been overlooked. Dick went out of the trench and began to clamber about over the great stones and rocks. A small animal suddenly caught his eye, a young rabbit. It stared at him in fright and then disappeared behind a slab of stone. It peeped out at Dick again, and he was amused. He went cautiously over to the slab, and the little rabbit disappeared. But soon 2 or 3 whiskers poked out. Dick got down on hands and knees and looked behind the slab to see a dark hole. He pulled out his torch and flashed it into the hole. To his surprise it was a very big hole indeed, a hole that seemed to go down and down and down. His torch could make out no bottom to it. "It's far too wide for a rabbit hole," he thought. "I wonder where it leads to." He went back to where the boy was still showing his things to Julian. "I say," began Dick, "there's a most interesting hole behind one of the stone slabs over there. What is it?" "Oh, that," said the boy. "My father says it was a place for storage, meat in hot weather, or loot, or something like that. Nothing whatever was found there. Most uninteresting." "Here's another shelf with things on it," said George, suddenly spying a little collection in another part of the trench. "Are these yours too?" "Those? No," said the boy. "Nothing to do with me at all. Don't touch them, please." "Whose are they, then?" asked George curiously. The boy took no notice whatever of her question, and went on talking to Julian. George took down a beautiful little round pot. "Hey, I told you not to touch those!" yelled the boy, so suddenly and angrily that George almost dropped the pot. "Put it back, and clear out if you can't do what you're told." "Easy, old man, easy," said Julian. "No need to yell at her like that. Come on, George, we'd better go, I think." "Well, I don't like being disturbed too much," said the boy. "People always seem to be wandering around." "People?" said Julian. "What kind of people?" "Oh, nosy ones. wanting to get down and explore, disturbing me. It's surprising how many idiots there are wandering about this lonely place," said the boy. He grinned suddenly. "I don't mean you. You really know something about this kind of thing." "Was anyone about last night?" asked Julian. "Well, I rather think so," said the boy, "because Jet here barked like mad." "What's your name?" asked Dick. "Guy Lordler," said the boy, and Dick whistled. "My word! Is your father the famous explorer, Sir John Lordler?" he asked. The boy nodded. "No wonder you're so keen on archaeology," said Dick. "Come on, Dick," said George. "Let's be on our way. We might have time for a swim in the pool. There's a lovely one quite close to our camp." "Right," said Dick. "Goodbye, Guy." They all went back to the cottage to get their swimsuits and change. It wasn't long before they were running over the heather to the pool. "Hello, Guy's having a swim," said Dick in surprise. Sure enough, a boy was there, his hair falling over his forehead as usual. He was already getting out of the water. "Wait a minute, Guy," shouted Dick. "Don't go. We'd like to have a swim with you." The boy turned defiantly. "My name's not Guy," he said, and leaving 4 astonished people behind him, he ran lightly over the heather and disappeared. "There you are. He's mad after all," said Anne. "Don't bother about him. Come on in. The water's lovely and warm." They had a good swim and lazed about afterwards. Back at the cottage they changed into ordinary clothes and then had tea, fruit cake, shortbread biscuits and tinned pineapple. They kept the juice and diluted it with cold spring water. It was simply delicious. "Now let's explore the cottage," said Dick. "We already have," said George, "but we didn't find anything much." They went methodically through the old house and even up the old stone stairway to the 2 rooms upstairs, though they could hardly be called rooms, for they had very little roof and not much wall. "Nothing much here, that's certain," said Dick, clattering down the stone stairway. "Now, let's go to the outbuildings, not that there's much left of them either." They examined everything, and came last of all to the old stables. It was dark inside, for the windows were very small. "Old mangers," said Dick, touching them. "I wonder how long ago it is since they were used." "I say," said George suddenly, "there's something funny here. Anne, look, this bit of floor was undisturbed yesterday, wasn't it?" Anne looked down at the big white flagstones on which George was standing. It was quite obvious that it had been lifted, for the edges were not as green with moss as the others were, and the stone had been put back a little crookedly. "Yes, someone's been interested in this stone, or in what is beneath it," said Dick. "I bet something is buried underneath." "Those men last night," said George. "That's what they came about. They went into these stables and lifted this stone. But what were they looking for?" "We'll soon find out," said Julian. "Come on, everyone, loosen it with your fingers. Then we'll heave it up." 40 fingers and thumbs were soon hard at work trying to loosen the heavy stone. At last Julian got hold of a corner which could be held more easily than any other part of the stone. He lifted it, and it went over with a crash. Everyone peered down, and then looked exceedingly disappointed. There was nothing there at all, not even a hole. The black earth, hard as iron, lay underneath, and nothing else. "Well, it's clear that whoever was here didn't find anything, nor did he hide anything either," said Julian. "Why should anyone lift up a heavy stone and put it back just for nothing?" "He was obviously looking for something that wasn't here," said Anne. "The wrong stone, probably." "Yes," said Dick. "Probably there's something very interesting under the right stone. But which one is it?" "From what you've told me, Anne," said Julian, "it looks as if someone is urgently hunting for something round about here." "I wonder if the people that Guy said came bothering him were anything to do with this," said Dick. "They may have been," said Julian, "but they have clearly decided that what they were looking for is here now, whatever it is. And they must have been most annoyed to find you and Anne here last night, George. That's why someone came and looked in at the window, I expect, to make sure you were asleep, which you weren't." The 5 walked round and about the cottage for a while, trying to make out where the people that the girls had seen the night before had come from. "The figures I saw first in the lightning stood about there," said Anne, pointing. "Let's go and see if there are any footprints. It was pouring with rain, and the ground must have been very muddy." "Good idea," said Dick, and off they went to where Anne had pointed. but it was a heathery piece of ground, and difficult to tell even if anyone had trodden there, for the heather was thick and springy. "Let's look just outside the window," said Dick, "the one where Anne saw someone looking in." And there they had a find. Just in front of the window were 2 quite deeply printed footmarks. Dick got out a piece of paper. "I think I'll measure these," he said, "and make a note of the pattern of the soles. They had rubber soles and heels. Look at the marking. Crepe rubber, I should think." He measured the prints. "Size 8 shoes," he said. Then he carefully drew an exact picture of the sole and heel markings. "You're quite a detective, Dick," said Anne admiringly. "Oh, anyone can copy footprints," he said. "The thing is to match them up with the owner." "I have a feeling it's getting on for supper time," said George. "It's 8:30. Would you believe that the time could fly so fast?" They made a cosy corner in the cottage and had a slice of cake and a biscuit each, with a drink of pineapple juice and spring water. "It's getting dark," said Julian. "Are we going to sleep inside the cottage or out?" "In," said Dick promptly. "We'll make things just as difficult for any night prowlers as possible." "Right," said Julian. "I bet they won't be pleased to find old Timmy here too. Shall we go out and get some heather for the beds? I don't fancy sharing a thin rug between the 4 of us." Soon they were all dragging in armfuls of the springy heather, which they laid in the front room. By the time they had finished it was dark. George lay down on her heather and yawned. "Oh, I'm going to sleep," she announced. "We don't need to keep guard or anything like that, do we? Timmy will bark if anyone comes near us." "You're right. I really don't think we need to take turns at keeping awake," said Julian. "Move up, Dick. You left me no room." Timmy was the last to go to sleep. He had one ear open as usual, but not very much open. After a while his ear dropped down and he didn't even hear a hedgehog outside. But then something caused his ear to listen again, and it pricked up. A noise crept inside the cottage, a noise that got louder and louder, a weird and puzzling noise. Timmy woke up and listened. He pawed at George, not knowing whether to bark or not. "Don't, Timmy," said George sleepily, but Timmy went on pawing her. Then she too heard the noise and sat up in a hurry. What a truly horrible sound! It was a whining and a wailing, rising and falling through the night, a sound of misery and woe that went on and on. "Julian? Dick? Wake up!" called George, her heart beating wildly. "Something's happening." The boys awoke at once, and so did Anne. They sat and listened to the weird noise. What in the world could it be? There it went again, wailing high in the air, and then dying away with a moan, only to begin again a few seconds later. Dick leapt off the heather bed and ran to the window. "Quick! Come and look at this!" he cried. They all crowded to the window. Blue and green lights were shining here and there, sometimes dimly, sometimes brightly. A curious round white light was travelling slowly in the air, and Anne clutched George, breathing fast. "I'll go out with Timmy and see what I can find," said Julian, and before anyone could stop him, out he went, Timmy barking beside him. They all waited tensely at the window, and then suddenly the wailing noise stopped, and the strange lights gradually began to fade. Then they heard Julian's footsteps coming back firmly in the darkness. "Julian? What was it?" called Dick, as his brother came in at the doorway. "I don't know, Dick," said Julian, sounding very puzzled. "I simply don't know. I seemed to go quite close to those wailing sounds, and then they stopped as soon as I got fairly near. But although Timmy barked and ran around, there didn't seem to be anyone there." "Did you get near the lights?" asked Dick. "Yes, fairly near, but the odd thing was that they seemed high up when I got near them, not near the ground as I expected. You'd have thought if there was anyone around playing the fool, Timmy would have found them, but he didn't." "Oof," said Timmy dolefully. He didn't like this queer business at all. "I've absolutely no idea what's going on, no idea at all," said Julian. "There is one idea I've got in my mind, though, which I'd like to sort out tomorrow." "What's this idea of yours, then, Julian?" asked Dick. "Well," said Julian, "it may be that somebody very badly wants us out of here for some reason, and that somebody may want to come and lift other stones and have a thorough search all over the place, which he can't do with us around. So he's trying to frighten us out. Yes, "I believe you're right," said Dick. "Those noises and lights, they would be enough to scare anyone out of a place. Let's have a good snoop round in the daylight to see if we can find any trace of a trickster." "We will," said Julian, "but it's extremely odd that Timmy didn't find him. Timmy can smell anyone out of any hiding place. Anyway, let's forget it for the moment and try to go to sleep again."
Five on a Secret Trail, Part 3.
The excitement of the night made them all sleep late. Julian awoke first and shook Dick, who yawned and stretched. Then they woke the girls. They had a good breakfast, and then went out to look round and see if they could find anything to explain the strange happenings of the night before. "The noises seemed to come from about here when I came out last night," said Julian, stopping near the little group of trees, "and the lights seemed to start about here too, but not near the ground. They were high up above my head." "What about those trees there?" said Anne. "Couldn't somebody climb up them and do the wailing and whining there with some strange instrument and set off the weird lights?" Julian stared up at the trees and then round at Anne. He grinned suddenly. "Anne's got it. Clever girl. Of course someone was up there, or maybe two people, one doing the noises with some weird instrument and the other playing about with fireworks of some kind, not the noisy kind, just coloured fire or balloons lighted up from inside." "Yes," cried Dick, "that's why the lights seemed to be so high up when you came out. They were sent out by someone up in a tree." "It explains something else too," said George. "It explains why Timmy didn't find anyone. They were safely up the trees." "Here's something, look," said Dick, picking something up from the ground. "A wrinkled little rubber skin, pale green. That's what those lights were, balloons lighted up from inside in some way and sent floating away in the air." "Most ingenious," said Julian. "They certainly mean to scare us away." "Well, they won't," said Anne unexpectedly. "I'm not going for one. I won't be scared away by stupid tricks." "Good old Anne," said Julian, and clapped her on the back. "We'll all stay." "But I've got an idea. We'll pretend to go. We'll pack up everything, remove our things from here and go and camp somewhere else. But Dick and I will hide somewhere here tonight and watch to see if anyone comes and where they look for whatever it is they're hunting for and why." The five spent quite a pleasant day, but when late afternoon came they decided that it was time to carry out their plan and pack as if they were leaving. "I imagine someone is spying on our doings," said Dick, "and won't he be surprised to see us apparently on the point of leaving?" "How can anyone be spying?" asked Anne, looking all around as if she expected to see someone behind a bush. "Timmy would be sure to sniff out anyone in hiding." "Oh, he won't be near enough for Timmy to smell out," said Dick. "He'll be a long way off and using field glasses." "Actually, I think I know where he is," said Julian. "I've caught sight of a little flash every now and again on the hill yonder, the kind of flash that is made by the sun on glass, and I somehow think that our spy is sitting near the top of the hill watching us carefully." They went on with their packing and soon began to stagger out with their bundles. George was told to strap her things to her bicycle and stand well out in the open as she did so that the watcher on the hill would be able to observe all her doings. Julian was in the midst of carefully folding up his things to go into his knapsack when Anne gave a sudden exclamation. "Someone's coming!" Everyone looked round. They saw a countrywoman hurrying along, a shawl over her head and a basket under her arm. She wore cheap glasses, had no make-up on, and her hair was pulled straight back under the shawl. She stopped when she saw the five. "Good afternoon," said Julian politely. "Isn't it glorious weather?" "Beautiful," said the woman. "Are you camping out? You've certainly chosen a very good time." "Actually, we're packing," said Julian. "We've been sleeping in the old cottage, but we've decided to move out." "Ah, yes," said the woman. "It's supposed to have queer things happening in it at nights." "We know that," said Julian. "We were pretty scared last night, I can tell you. Weird noises and horrible ghostly lights." "You get as far from this place as you can," said the woman. "I wouldn't come by it at night. Take my advice, and don't stay another night. Goodbye." She hurried off and was soon lost to sight. "Do you know what I think?" said Julian. "She's one of the unpleasant gang that tried to scare us last night, and when the watcher on the hill reported that we appeared to be packing up and going, she was told to go and make sure, so she pretended to be a country woman and came by." "I bet the gang will be down here tonight," said Dick, "digging up all the big stones they can find. You and I will have a marvellous time snooping round them. Now, come on, we'll make a new camp somewhere that won't be easily seen. Anne and George and Timmy can sleep there tonight. Any ideas where we can go, George?" "I know a place," said George. "There's a simply colossal gorse bush on the other side of the spring, and underneath it's all hollow and dry. It's almost like a kind of gorse cave." "Sounds all right," said Julian. "Let's go and find it." It certainly was a great bush, green and spiky outside, with a few yellow blooms on it still. Under it was a big hollow place where the ground was soft and fine, scattered with dry old prickles. The main trunk was not quite in the middle, so there was a good bit of room. Julian caught hold of the branches that hid the hollow and pushed them back. "This is fine," he said. "Plenty of room for you two girls and Timmy. My word, he'll have difficulty with his collar, though, squeezing in and out." "Take it off," said Dick. "His ear is practically healed now. Even if he scratches it, he can't do much damage." "Right," said George. She took a quick look at the ear. It was still covered by a piece of elastoplast, but it was quite obvious that it was healthy. She cut the thread that bound the two ends of the circular collar, and then bent it so that it came off. They all stared at Timmy, who looked most surprised. He wagged his tail gently, as if to say, "Ah, so you've taken that thing off at last." It was getting dark, and under the gorse bush it was very dark indeed. All the five had managed to squeeze in there, and Timmy too. They had just finished their supper, and Julian said, "Now, Dick, what about it? I think we might be going, don't you?" "Right," said Dick, and the two of them squeezed out carefully. The two girls sat quite still when the boys had gone from the bush. They curled up on the rug they had brought and cuddled together, not so much for warmth, because it was a hot night, but because there was so little room. Anne put out her torch, and the little place immediately became dark. Timmy put his head on George's tummy, and she groaned. "Oh, Tim, be careful, please. I had rather a lot of supper." Anne giggled and pulled Timmy's head close to her. It was comforting to have old Timmy here. "I wonder what the boys are doing now," she said, after a while. "Do you suppose they're in the middle of something exciting?" But they weren't. Julian and Dick were feeling extremely bored at that moment. They had gone cautiously to the cottage when they had left the girls, not using their torches at all, for fear of giving anyone warning that they were about. They had decided that it would be a good idea to climb up the little stone stair and hide in the roofless rooms above. "There's no roof there, and hardly any walls," said Dick. "We can peep over any side to watch, and no one would guess that anyone was above them, spying down. It's a good thing it's such a starry night. Once we get used to the dim light, we shall be able to see fairly well." They had approached the cottage very cautiously indeed, stopping at every step and listening with bated breath for any sound. But there was none. "I don't think anyone is here yet," said Dick. "Let's get into the cottage and up those stairs as soon as we can." They tiptoed into the cottage. Not daring to put on their torches, they fumbled across to the little stone stairway and climbed it with as little sound as they could. They sat down silently on the low broken wall of the 2 ruined rooms. The wind blew gently but warmly. Everything was still. The boys had been there for about 3/4 of an hour when Julian gave Dick a slight nudge. "Here they come," he whispered. "See, over there." Dick looked and caught sight of a small moving light, just a prick in the darkness. It cast a faint glow before it. "A torch," he whispered. "And another, and another. Quite a procession. A slow one, too." The procession made very little noise. It made its way to the cottage and then split up. "Having a look to see if we really are gone," whispered Julian. "Let's get behind the chimney." Very quietly they rose and made their way to where the remains of the chimney stood, a dark shadow in the starry night. The chimney was quite big, though rather crumbly. The 2 boys crouched close to it, on the side farthest from where the stone stairway came up in the corner. "Someone's coming," whispered Dick, his sharp ears catching the sound of someone's feet on the stone stairs. Someone came right up the stairway. A torch shone out over the ruined rooms, the crumbling walls and the remains of the chimney. The boys held their breath and stood like statues. The light of the torch played over the place for 1 second, and then a voice called down the stairs. "No one here. The kids have gone." The boys let out a long breath. Good. They were safe, for the time being at any rate. The visitors down below were no longer cautious. They spoke in ordinary voices, and torches flashed all over the place. Then someone lighted 2 lanterns, and the little cottage shone quite brightly. "Where do we start?" said a voice. "Here, Jess. Where's that plan?" "I've got it. I'll spread it out on the floor," said a voice that the boys recognised at once. It was the voice of the countrywoman who had spoken to them that day. "Not that it's much use. Paul's no good at drawing." "All we know for certain," said another voice, "is that we have to find that white stone slab, and we know the size, but we don't know the place, except that we think it must be here. After all, we've searched the old Roman camp, and there are no slabs there that size." Julian nudged Dick. So some of the visitors that Guy had complained of must have been these searchers. Then a drawling voice said, "If we have to get up every great slab in this neighbourhood, we will. If we don't find that slab, we don't find those blueprints, and if we don't find them, we might as well go into the poorhouse for the rest of our lives." "Or prison," said someone. "Not prison," said the drawling voice. "It'll be Paul who goes to prison. It was him who stole them, not us." "Can't you get Paul to draw a better plan than this?" said the voice of the countrywoman. "I can't understand half that's written here." "He's ill, almost off his head too," said someone. "He had such a time escaping with those prints, he nearly died." "I can't make out this word here," said the woman. W-A-D-E-R. What does that mean? "I don't know," said the drawling voice. "Wait, though. It might be W-A-T-E-R. Water. T, not D in the middle. Where's the well? I bet there's a slab over the well. That's the way to the secret hiding place." Julian clutched Dick. He was excited as the man down below. The boys listened eagerly, straining their ears. "Here's the old sink," said a voice, "and this must be the remains of the pump. The well's underneath this slab, and look! The stone is just about the right size. Come on, let's get it up." Soon there came the sound of loud breathing and grunts as the searchers tried to prise up the stone by the pump. It was obviously very heavy and very difficult to move, for it had become almost part of the floor itself through the centuries. "Drat the thing! It's tearing my hands to pieces," said a voice. "Lend me that jemmy, Tom." After a lot more struggling and panting, the stone was loosened. "Up she comes," said a voice, and up came the stone so suddenly that it sounded as if most of those pulling it had sat down very hard on the floor. "Is it a well down there?" said the woman. "Yes, it is. The water's pretty far down, and black as pitch, too." There was a silence as the well was examined in the light of torches. Then an exasperated voice, the one with the drawl, said, "This is no secret way. Who's going to get through that water? It's just an ordinary small well and nothing else. The word can't have meant water." "All right, boss, what does it mean then?" said the woman. "All we know is that it's on this common somewhere near here, and the secret way is behind a slab." "And all we have to do is go and look behind dozens of heavy slabs," said someone else. "I'm fed up. We've lifted slabs in that wretched camp, we've lifted some here, and we still don't know if we're anywhere near the right one." "Shut up," said the voice of the trawler, but now the voice was sharp and angry. "If we have to pull this cottage down, if we have to lift every slab there is, if we have to take over that camp, I'll do it. Let's lift a few more slabs. There aren't so very many that are the size that Paul figured on this plan." Then began a boring time for the two hidden boys, as slab after slab was lifted and put back. Apparently nothing was found under any of them. "No go," said the trawler at last. "I think we'll have to search that camp really well again." "That's going to be difficult with someone already there," said the woman. "We'll deal with him," said a voice grimly. "Well, we're wasting our time here anyway," said the woman. "Let's go." To the boys' great relief, the searchers left the cottage and went off together. Julian and Dick leaned over the crumbling wall of the room they stood in and watched the lights of the torches and lanterns getting dimmer and dimmer over the common. "Well, we know a lot more now, don't we?" said Dick. "It's clear that someone called Paul has stolen some valuable blueprints of something. Maybe a new plane, or a battleship perhaps, and has hidden them in some secret place he knew of around here, and to get to it you have to lift a slab of stone of a certain size." "Yes," said Julian, "and we know the size because we've already seen the one they lifted in the old stables. I vote we go there and measure it, or measure the one by the sink. I should think that the right slab will be somewhere in the old camp. We'd better tell Guy and let him into the secret. He can help us to search." The boys went down the stone stairs and carefully measured the stone slab by the sink. Then they made their way out of the cottage and up towards the great gorse bush by the spring. They heard a small welcome bark from Timmy. "Is that you?" said Anne's voice as the boys squeezed through into the hollow middle. "You've been ages. We haven't slept a wink." The boys settled down and torches were put on. Julian related the curious happenings to the two interested girls. George was thrilled. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "Warn Guy first thing in the morning," said Julian, "and then get in touch with the police, I think. We ourselves can't stop the men searching the camp, and as soon as they do find the slab they're looking for, they can easily get what they want and go off with it." "Well, it's really thrilling," said George. "I'll never go to sleep tonight." But they did manage to drop off to sleep, for they were all very tired. After a few hours, just as dawn was breaking, Timmy lifted his head and growled. George woke at once. "What is it, Tim?" "I can't hear anything." But Timmy could, that was certain. George woke Julian and made him listen to Timmy's continuous growling. "He keeps on," she said. "I can't hear a thing, can you?" "No," said Julian, listening. "It's no use my creeping out and going searching in the dark for whatever Tim is growling at. It might be something silly like a weasel or a hedgehog." "Shut up, Tim. That's enough." Tim stopped growling at last and put his head down on his paws, closing his eyes. George patted him. "Well, whatever it was, it's gone," she said. It was late when they finally woke. Dick was the first, and he looked at his watch. He gave an exclamation. "Gosh! It's 8:30. Wake up, everybody, it's almost afternoon." Everyone felt stiff and cramped. They had a hurried breakfast, and then they went off to warn Guy. As they came near the camp, they stopped in amazement. Someone was howling down in the trench, howling so miserably and so broken-heartedly that the five felt quite panic-stricken. Whatever in the world could have happened? They ran to the edge of the excavations and looked down into the trench. The boy was there, lying on his face, sobbing. "Guy!" "Whatever's happened?" shouted Julian. He leapt down beside the boy. "You hurt? What's the matter?" "It's Guy," howled the boy. "He's gone. They've taken him, and I was so awful to him. He'll never come back. I know he won't." "Guy's gone? But you're Guy," said Julian in astonishment. "What do you mean?" The boy sprang to his feet, his face swollen and stained. "I tell you, Guy's gone. I'm not Guy, he's my twin. There are two of us." Everyone gasped. It took half a minute to think about this and get everything straight, and then, of course, many things were clear. There was not one mad boy, there were two ordinary boys, twins. There wasn't, as they had thought, just one boy who contradicted himself all the time, who seemed continually to appear suddenly and unexpectedly, and who was sometimes nice and sometimes not. "Twins," said Julian. "Why on earth didn't we think of that before? We thought there was only one of you. You were never together." "No," said the boy. "We quarrelled bitterly. We hated one another, we really did. We wouldn't be with one another. We wouldn't eat together or dig together or sleep together. We've often quarrelled before, but not like this. I just pretended that he didn't exist, and he did the same with me." "Well, what's happened to make you so upset?" said Julian. "Guy wanted to be friends with me again last night," said the boy, "and I wouldn't. I hit him and walked away. Then this morning I was sorry and went to find him and be friends. I was just in time to see him fighting two men and screaming at them and kicking. Then they hustled him away somewhere. I fell down in the trench and hurt my leg, and by the time I dragged myself up, Guy had gone, and so had everyone else." He turned away and wept again. "I'll never forgive myself, never. I could have helped him and I didn't." It was Anne who comforted the boy. She went to him and pulled him down on a stone beside her. "Let me look at your leg," she said. "It's pretty bad, isn't it? I'll bind it up for you. Don't be so upset. We'll help you. I think we know what's happened, don't we, Julian?" The boy looked at Anne gratefully and sniffed hard. When she offered him her handkerchief, he took it and wiped his face. Dick gave Anne his big hanky to bind up the boy's cut and bruised leg. "How do you know what's happened?" he said to Julian. "Can you get Guy back? My name's Harry Lordler, and Guy and I are mad on old camps and buildings and things. We spend almost all our holidays together, digging and exploring." "Yes, Guy told us," said Dick, "but he never said a word about you. We were often puzzled. You're so very much alike." "Can you tell us a bit about the people that Guy was fighting?" asked Julian. "They came before, wanting Guy to clear out while they had a look round," said Harry. "Guy was pretty rude to them. In fact, I heard him say that if they messed about his camp, he would throw stones at them. He's like that, very fierce when he's roused." "And you think these were the same people?" said Dick. "Which way did they go with Guy?" "That way," said Harry, pointing. "I've hunted the whole camp round, but they're gone, disappeared into thin air." "Let's have a hunt round ourselves," said Julian. "We might find something, but I imagine that the searchers have taken Guy off because he knew too much. Perhaps they found what they were looking for and saw Guy watching." "Then we're too late," said George in deep disappointment. "They've got what they want, and they'll disappear now and never be caught. I expect by now they're speeding away in a fast car with Guy." "Oh, no," cried Harry. "He's not kidnapped, is he?" "Come on, let's have a hunt," said Julian, and they all made their way along the various trenches and pits, looking for they hardly knew what. They gave it up after a while. There were too many slabs and stones of all sizes. Besides, what good would it be even if they found the right one? The birds had flown, presumably with what they had come for. "It's no good," said Julian at last. "This is too big a place to know where to look for anything that might help us. Let's go back to the gorse bush and collect our things, return to Kiran and go to the police." "Come along, Harry," said Anne. "You'd better come with us and tell all you know." They all left the camp and made their way back to the gorse bush. They sat outside in the sun and discussed the situation. "I believe," said George, "when Timmy began to growl about 6 o'clock this morning, it was because he could hear those people coming quietly by to go to search the camp." "I think you're right," said Julian. "I bet they searched the camp well, till Guy woke and came on the scene. It's a pity I didn't squeeze out from under the bush and follow them when Timmy growled." "Anyone want a drink?" said George. "I'll go and fetch some water from the spring." She got up and took the little rabbit path that led to the spring. She could hear it gurgling and bubbling as she came near, a very pleasant sound. "I really love the sound of water," she thought to herself. Water. Now, why did that ring a bell in her mind? Been talking about water? Oh, Dick and Julian, of course, when they'd come back from the old cottage last night. They had told Anne and herself about the word on the plan, the word that might have been water or wader. She gazed at the beautiful little spring jutting up from the stony slabs, and then another bell rang loudly in her mind. Stone slabs. Water. I wonder if one of these slabs is the one. This one, just here, is about the right size. She stared at it. It was set firmly in a high little bank at the back of the place where the spring gurgled up and then ran into the clean stony channel. Was there anything hidden behind it? She dropped the water jug and ran back to the others at full speed. "Julian!" she shouted. "Julian! I believe I've found the slab. It's been staring at us in the face the whole time." "What do you mean, George?" said Julian, jumping to his feet. "Show me." Followed by everyone, George ran back to the spring. She pointed to the white slab behind the water. "There," she said. "That's the right size, isn't it? And it's beside the water, just as it said in the plan you told us about, only the people thought it was wader." "Let's try and move it," said Dick. They began to struggle with the stone, getting extremely wet as they splashed about in the spring. The slab moved a little. It slid to one side and stuck. More tugging, more pulling, more panting and puffing. "It's too heavy and well embedded," said Julian at last. "I'll go and get some of my tools," said Harry. "I'm used to heaving stones about with them. We can easily manage to move it if we have the right tools." He flew off at top speed. The others sat down and mopped their streaming foreheads. When Harry returned, the things he had fetched proved very useful indeed, especially a big jemmy-like tool. The stone began to move when this was applied by Julian and Harry working together. The stone was prized right out and fell into the stony channel where the water ran. The 5 children stared at the opening it left. Julian leaned forward and looked into it. "Yes, there's a big hole behind," he said. "Let me shine my torch in." In great excitement, he flashed his torch into the opening. "Yes, I think we've got it. There's a tunnel behind, going down and down. It widens out behind this hole." "Let's explore it," said George, her eyes shining. "I'll get in first," said Julian. "Everyone got torches? We shall need them. It's going to be dark in there." He clambered up and into the hole. He had to crawl on hands and knees for a little way, and then the hole suddenly went downwards and became considerably bigger. Julian could walk in it if he bent down, for at that point the tunnel was about 3 feet high. He called to the others, "Follow me!" George followed after Julian, then Anne, then Dick, then Harry. Timmy went with George, of course, pushing and shoving like all the rest. Julian walked carefully along the narrow tunnel, which went steadily downwards. Soon it widened again and became higher, and it was easier to walk in comfort. "Do you suppose this is the right secret way?" called George after a time. "We don't seem to be getting anywhere." "I can't tell," said Julian. "In fact, we shan't know till we find something hidden somewhere, if we ever do." The tunnel wound about a good deal, and then suddenly the rather soft ground they were treading on turned to rock. Julian stopped at once. He heard another sound. What was it? "Water," he said. "There must be an underground stream here." The tunnel ended suddenly, and Julian found himself in a big cave with a high roof. Almost in the middle of it ran a stream. It gurgled along in a small channel of rock, which it had carved out for itself through hundreds of years. Julian shone his torch on it. The water looked very black and glittered in the light of the torch. The others came out one by one out of the tunnel and stared at the underground stream. Julian looked round the cave. "Does our tunnel end here?" he wondered. "Is this where we have to look for whatever is hidden?" "We'll have a look round and see if there are any exits," said Dick. Using their torches, the 5 separated, Timmy keeping close to George.
5 on a Secret Trail by Enid Blyton. Part 4.
"I've found another tunnel over here leading out of the cave," called Dick. No sooner had he said that than Anne called out too, "There's one here as well." "Now which do we take?" said Julian. How annoying that there should be two. "Would Paul have marked the correct underground way on his plan?" said George. "I mean, I don't see how he could possibly expect anyone to find what he had hidden if there are several passages to choose from down here." "You're right," said Julian. "Let's look about and see if we can find anything to help us." It wasn't long before Dick gave another shout. "It's all right. This is the passage to take over here. There's an arrow drawn in white chalk on the wall." Everyone crowded over to Dick, who held up his torch. They all saw the white arrow drawn roughly on the wall. "Good," said Julian. "That shows we're going the right way. Come on." They entered the tunnel, left the little stream behind and went on again. "Anyone got any idea in which direction we're going?" called Dick. Harry had a compass. He looked at it and said, "I think we're going roughly in the direction of the old Roman camp. I've seen a plan of the camp as it probably used to be, and there are plenty of tunnels and caves and holes shown on it." The tunnel suddenly forked into two. One passage was nice and wide, the other narrow. Harry shone his torch in at the second opening, the very narrow one. There, clearly marked on the right-hand wall, was a white arrow in chalk. This tunnel was very narrow indeed, and had rough, jutting, rocky sides. And then they came to a blank wall of rock. "We can't go this way," said Julian. "This is a blind alley." He shone his torch over his head and gave an exclamation. "There's a hole above my head." "Is there a white arrow anywhere?" called Harry. "Yes, and it's pointing up instead of forwards," called back Julian. "We're still all right. We've got to go upwards now. But how?" George was just behind him, shone her torch on the side walls. "Look," she said. "We can easily get up to the hole. There are rough natural steps up, made by ledges of rock." "You're right," said Julian. "George, you go first. I'll give you a boost up." George put her torch between her teeth and began to climb up the ledges, Julian pushing her as best he could. She came to the hole and immediately saw that it would be quite easy to hoist herself through. With one last heave she was up, rolling on the floor of a small cave above. She called down in excitement to the others, "I believe this is the place where those things are hidden. I can see something on a ledge." The others followed eagerly. George was pointing her torch at a broad ledge of rock. On it was a brown leather bag, and beside it, marked on the rock, was a very large arrow indeed. Julian picked up the bag. "Open it!" cried everyone, but Julian couldn't. It was locked, and there was no key. "Can we cut it open?" asked George. "No, I don't think so," said Julian. "It's made of really strong leather. We'd need a special knife to cut through it. An ordinary penknife wouldn't be any use. We'll just have to assume that we've got the goods and hope for the best. If they're not in here, it's just bad luck." "What do we do now?" asked George. "Go back all through that long tunnel again?" "Wait," said Anne, her sharp eyes catching sight of something. "Look. What does all this mean?" She shone her torch onto various signs on the wall. Again there were arrows drawn in white chalk, but this time they were pointing horizontally across the wall. "Perhaps this line of arrows means that there's a second way out," suggested George. They all looked round the little rocky room. There didn't seem any way out at all. "Where's Timmy?" said Anne suddenly, flashing her torch round. "He's not here." "Timmy, where are you?" George called. She whistled shrilly, and from somewhere there came a bark. "Where did that bark come from?" said Dick. "It didn't sound as if it came from below, down that hole." There came another loud bark, and the sound of Timmy's feet, and then, to everyone's amazement, he appeared in the little rocky room as if by magic, straight out of the wall. "Timmy, where have you come from?" cried George, and she ran to see. She came to a standstill and exclaimed loudly, "Oh, what idiots we are! Why, just behind this big jutting-out piece of rock there's another passage." And so there was. A very, very narrow one, it's true, and completely hidden from the children because of the enormous slab of rock that jutted out from the wall and hid it. They stood and stared at it, shining their torches on the narrow way. The arrows ran round the wall towards it. "We never even looked properly," said Dick. "Still, it's a passage that would be extremely difficult to spot, hidden round the corner of that rock. This might be an easier, shorter way out, or it might be a harder, longer one." "It won't be longer," said Harry. "By my reckoning we must be pretty well near the camp now. It's likely that the way leads straight there, though where it comes out I can't imagine." Dick suddenly thought of something he had noticed in the camp, the big hole behind the slab of stone, where he had seen the baby rabbit a day or two before. "Harry," he said, "would this lead to that enormous hole underground? The one that Guy once told me had been explored but was of no interest, probably just an old store place?" "Yes," said Harry, "it might lead to that. We're fairly near the camp, I'm sure, and we may well find that if we go on instead of going back, we shall come into the camp itself, probably through that great hole." "Then come on," said Julian. They squeezed through the narrow opening that led out of the little rocky room. The passage grew wider immediately, and everyone was thankful. It ran fairly straight, and then went steeply downward, so that the five slithered about, and Timmy found himself suddenly running. Then it came to a stop, a complete stop. This time it was not a blank wall of rock that faced them. It was something else. "A roof fall," groaned Dick. "Look at that! Now we're done." It certainly looked most formidable. Earth, rocks and stones had fallen from the roof and blocked up the whole passageway. There was no use going on. They would just have to turn and go back. They looked at each other despondently. "Come on, Timmy," said George. But Timmy was standing beside the roof fall, looking very puzzled, his ears cocked and his head on one side. Then he suddenly gave a sharp bark. "Whatever's the matter?" said George. Timmy began to paw at the pile of earth and rocks in front of him, and barked without stopping. "Timmy, what on earth's the matter?" said Julian. Timmy took absolutely no notice, but went on feverishly scraping at the roof fall, sending earth and stones flying all over the others. "There's something he wants to get at, something behind this roof fall," said Dick. "Make him stop barking, George," said Julian, "and we'll listen and see if we can hear anything." George silenced Timmy with difficulty and made him stand quiet and still. Then they all listened intently, and a sound came at once to their ears. "Yup, yup, yup! Yup, yup, yup!" "It's Jet!" yelled Harry. "Then Guy must be with him. He never leaves Guy." Timmy began to bark wildly again, and to scrape more furiously than ever. Julian shouted to the others above the barking, "If we can hear Jet barking, this roof fall can't be very big. We'd better try and get through it." Then began some very hard work, but it didn't last as long as Julian feared, because quite suddenly the mass of rubble and rock shifted as they worked, and a gap appeared at the top of the heap, between it and the roof. A little figure came into view on the top of the rubble above their heads, and slid down to them, yapping loudly and waving a long wiry tail. "Jet!" cried Harry, as the little dog leapt into his arms and licked his face joyfully. "Oh, Jet! Where's Guy?" "Guy!" yelled Julian. "Are you there?" A weak voice came back. "Yes? Who's that?" "It's us, and Harry. We're coming, we shan't be long." And it wasn't long either before the roof fall was slowly and carefully climbed by each one, though Timmy, of course, scrambled up, over and down at top speed. On the other side of the roof fall was a passage, the continuation of the one the children had come along. Guy was there, sitting down, looking very pale. Jet flung himself on him and licked him as if he hadn't seen him for a month instead of just a minute or two before. "Hello," said Guy in a small voice. "I'm all right. It's just my ankle, that's all." Before he could say a word, Harry was beside him, his arms round him. "Guy, are you really all right?" he said. "What happened to you?" "Well," said Guy, "I was fast asleep this morning. Jet began to bark, and I wondered why, so I got up to see, and I saw 4 people in the camp." "We know those 4," said Dick, and Julian nodded. "They were looking all over the place," said Guy, "prizing up rocks, messing about, so I yelled at them, but they only laughed. Then one of the men, who was trying to prize up a slab, the slab that covers that great hole underground, Harry, you remember it, well, this man gave a yell and said, 'I've got it. This is the way in, down here, behind this slab.' Well, I set Jet on them, and they kicked him, so I went for them. One of the men pretty well knocked me out. He hit me on the head and I went down, dazed. I heard him say, 'Drat this kid, he'll be fetching help and we shan't be able to get down and hunt for the goods.' And then another man said, 'We'll take him with us.' And then they got hold of me and dragged me through the opening." "But how did they get down into that great hole?" said Harry in wonder. "They had a rope," said Guy. "They knotted it fast round a rock, and then they swung down on it. I screamed and shouted and kicked and howled, but it wasn't any good. They made me swing down the rope, and I fell off halfway down and hurt my ankle. They hurried me along with them, shaking me like a rat. I heard one of them say that there should be a tunnel out of the hole somewhere. It was marked on Paul's plan, whatever that may be. And then I think I must have fainted. When I came to myself again, we were all here, beside this roof fall. They were furious when they saw it. They stood and talked for a bit, and then they decided to go and get some tools and come down again to see if they could remove all this stuff and get through it." "Good gracious," said Julian, startled. "Then they may be back at any moment." "I suppose so," said Guy. "They left me here because they couldn't think of anything else to do with me. They knew I couldn't walk because of my ankle. I think it's broken." Everyone began to feel rather uncomfortable at the thought that the gang might be appearing at any moment. "Is it very far to the opening you came down?" asked Julian. But Guy didn't know. He had fainted, as he had said, and he didn't even know which way they had come. "It can't be far," said Harry. "I think it would be worth while trying to find the opening, see if the men have left the rope there and get out that way. If Guy's ankle really is broken, he couldn't possibly manage to go back the long way we've come." "No, that's true," said Julian thoughtfully. "Well, that's what we'll do then." "What about Guy?" said George. Julian knelt down beside the boy and gently examined his ankle. "It's not broken," he said. "I believe I could bandage it tightly with a couple of large hankies. Give me yours, Dick." The others watched admiringly as Julian deftly and confidently bandaged Guy's swollen ankle. "There," he said. "You can perhaps hobble on it now, Guy. It may hurt, but I don't think it will damage it. You'll have to go barefoot because your ankle is too swollen for your shoe to go on." Very gingerly Guy stood up, helped by Harry. He tried his hurt foot, and it certainly seemed all right to hobble on, though it was very painful. "It's fine," he said. "Come on, let's go. We don't want to bump into those fellows if we can help it." They set off down the passage, flashing their torches in front to show them the way. The tunnel was quite wide and high here, and in a very short time they came out into an enormous pit underground. "Ah, this is the hole I saw down behind the slab where the rabbit went," said Dick. "We weren't very far from the camp, as we thought." They looked round the enormous hole. It was really a huge round pit. Daylight showed in the roof at one place. "That's the opening into it," said Guy eagerly. "The one I came through on the rope." He pointed upwards. "There's the rope. The men have left it behind, thank goodness. They must have been certain that I couldn't get to it." The rope hung down from the little opening high above their heads. "We can't afford to waste any time," said Julian. "George, you go up first." George went up like a monkey, hand over hand, her leg twisted round the rope. She grinned down when she got to the top. "Easy," she said. "Come on up next, Anne, and show the boys how to do it." Before the boys could leap to the rope, Anne was on it, pulling herself up lithely. It was difficult to get Guy up, for he was feeling weak, but they managed it at last. The two dogs had to have the boys' shirts tied round them, so that the rope wouldn't cut them when they were hauled up. They didn't seem to mind at all. Everyone was up in the open air at long last, hot and perspiring. Julian had the precious bag safely under his arm. Timmy sat down panting. Then he suddenly stopped panting and pricked up his ears. "Oh!" he said warningly, and stood up. "Quiet, Tim," said Julian, at once aware that somebody must be about. "Hide everyone quickly. It may be those fellows coming back." The 6 children separated and went into hiding at once, each choosing the best place he or she could see. They heard voices coming near. Julian and Dick recognised the drawling voice of one of the men. "What a time we've been," said the man. "Just chuck the spades and things down the hole. Then we'll all climb down again. Buck up. We've wasted too much time already." The spades and jemmies went hurtling down the hole. Then one by one the men went down the rope. Julian couldn't hear the woman's voice. Perhaps she'd been left behind. He gave a low whistle, and all the others popped up their heads. "We'll spring for it," said Julian. "Buck up." They all shot out of their hiding places at once and made off, except Julian. He stayed behind for a minute or two and hauled up the rope that dangled underground. Then he tied it round his waist, grinned a very wide grin, and went after the others. Guy limped along, helped by Harry, who couldn't do enough for him. Jet ran alongside them, excited and happy. "What are we going to do about Guy?" asked Harry. "He can't really walk very far on that bad foot." "If he can walk as far as the gorse bush where we've left our things, I've got a bike there," said George. "He could pedal with one foot, I should think." "Oh, yes, I could easily do that," said Guy. They came to the gorse bush and found their things all safe. They all started off together, Guy riding ahead on the bicycle. "We'll go to Kiran," said Julian, "and get Aunt Fanny to ring the police and ask them if they'll come along and collect this bag from us. I don't want to leave it at the police station. I want to see it opened in front of us." "How are you getting on, Guy?" asked George. "Very well indeed, thank you," said Guy. "This bike was a very good idea of yours." "It does make me almost laugh," said Anne, "when I think how puzzled we all were when we thought there was just one of you." "Oh, don't remind us of it," said Harry. "I can't bear to think that if I'd only been with Guy, all this trouble of his would never have happened." They went down the long lane and came into Kiran at last. They trooped through the garden gate of Kiran Cottage and up to the front door, which was open. George shouted, "Mother! Mother, where are you? We've come back." The door of the study opened and her father looked out, red in the face and frowning. "George, how many times am I to tell you not to shout when I'm working? Who on earth are all these?" "Hello, father," said George mildly. "Surely you know Anne and Julian and Dick. Don't say you've forgotten them already." "Of course not. But who are these?" And George's father pointed to the startled twins. "They're as like as 2 peas in a pod. Where did they come from? Haven't seen them before, have I?" "No, father. They're just friends of ours," said George. "Where's mother? We've just had an adventure and we want to tell her. Oh, and we want to ring the police, and I think we ought to get a doctor to look at Guy's foot." "There's never any peace when you're about, George," said her father, groaning. "Your mother's at the bottom of the garden picking raspberries." "Let's go and find her," said Julian. They all went out into the garden, hearing the house echo to the slam of Uncle Quentin's study door. Aunt Fanny was very surprised to see them all advancing upon her. "Well, I thought you wanted to stay away for longer than this," she said. "We did," said Julian, "but an adventure descended on us. May we ring the police and ask them to come here? There's something that might be very important for them to know. And also, do you think we can get a doctor to come and take a look at Guy's foot?" "Oh dear," said Aunt Fanny, distressed to see the boy's swollen foot. "Yes, he ought to have that seen to properly. Who is he?" "Dear me, there's another of them. Aren't they alike?" "They're twins," said George shortly. Julian went indoors, and they heard him speaking on the telephone. He put the receiver down and came out again. "The inspector himself is coming," he said. "Shall I ring the doctor now, Aunt Fanny?" "Yes," said his aunt. "His number is 042. "How did you get such an ankle, Guy?" "Mother, you don't seem at all interested in our adventure," complained George. "Oh, I am, dear," said her mother. "But you do have such a lot, you know." What have you been up to this time?" But before George could do more than begin, a black police car drew up at the front gate, and a police inspector got out and marched up to the front door. He knocked extremely loudly on the knocker, which of course had the immediate result of bringing George's father hot foot out of his study in another rage. He flung open the front door. "Hammering at the door like that!" he shouted. "What's the matter? I've a good mind to report you to the police. Good afternoon, Inspector. Do come in. Are we expecting you?" Smiling broadly, the inspector came in. By this time Julian had come back from telephoning the doctor. His uncle went back into his study, rather red in the face, and actually closed the door quietly. "You wanted me to come along at once because of something important," said the inspector. "What is it?" The others came into the room now, with Julian's aunt behind them. "We've brought you something we think may be important, sir," said Julian. "Quite a lot of people were looking for it, but we managed to get hold of it first." He put the brown bag on the table. The inspector's eyes went to it at once. "What is it?" he asked. "We think it's blueprints of some kind," said Julian, "but we don't know for certain. We can't open it. It's locked and there's no key." "We'll soon take care of that," said the inspector, and he took out a small, strong-looking tool. He forced the lock and the bag sprang open. Everyone leaned forward eagerly, even Timmy. There was nothing there, absolutely nothing. Julian groaned in bitter disappointment. "No wonder it felt so light," he said. "It's empty after all. Would you believe it?" It was a moment of great disappointment for all the children. Everyone had secretly felt certain that something exciting would be inside. "Where did you get this bag?" asked the inspector. "What made you think it had stolen goods inside, and what kind of blueprints did you think they were?" Julian told him the whole story, making it as clear and short as he could. The inspector became more and more interested. He laughed when Julian came to the weird noises and lights. "They certainly wanted to get rid of you," he said. He jotted down the name of Paul in his pocket-book and noted that one man had a drawl. "Any other clues to them?" he asked. "Only this, sir," said Julian, and handed over the drawing of the crepe-soled shoe to the inspector. The bag lay on the table in front of them, and the inspector picked it up again. "Can't understand why it's empty," he said. "It isn't like a crook deliberately to mislead his friends when they know quite well where he is and can get at him whenever they like." He shook the bag hard. Then he began to examine it very carefully. Finally he took out a sharp knife and gently slit the lining at the bottom of the bag. He turned it back, and there, under the lining, was something blue, folded very carefully, something covered with thousands of minute figures, thousands of lines, and thousands of queer little designs. The inspector whistled. "Now, what have we here?" he said. "It's a blueprint, all right, but what sort of a blueprint?" "My father would know," said George at once. "He's a scientist, you know. Shall I get him, Inspector?" "Yes," said the inspector, laying out the blueprint on the table. "Get him at once." George flew off and returned with her father, who didn't look very pleased. "Good afternoon, sir, once more. Sorry to disturb you," said the inspector, "but do you happen to know whether this document is of any importance?" George's father took it up. He ran his eyes over it and then gave a loud exclamation. "It's impossible," he said. "Good heavens, it's... No, it can't be." Everyone gazed at him, surprised and anxious. "It's important, then, sir," said the inspector. "Important? My dear fellow, there are only 2 of these prints in existence, and at the moment I have the second one. Sir James Lawton Harrison has the other. There isn't a third. Where did this come from?" "But there must be a third copy if you have one here and Sir James has the other," said the inspector. "It's obvious." "What is obvious," shouted George's father, "is that Sir James hasn't got his. I'll ring him up this very minute." The children were full of astonishment. To think that the blueprint was so important, and that George's father actually had a pair to this one. They heard George's father shouting into the telephone, evidently angry and disturbed. He slammed down the receiver and came back. "Sir James's copy has been stolen, but it's been kept very hush-hush because of its importance. Now there's only 1 copy left." "2, sir," said the inspector, tapping the copy on the table. "You've forgotten we had the second one here." "Yes, I had forgotten," said Uncle Quentin. "My word, I even forgot to tell Sir James it was here." He leapt up to go to the telephone again, but the inspector caught his arm. "No, sir, don't telephone again. I think we should keep this as quiet as possible." "Father, what is this a blueprint of?" asked George. "I'm certainly not going to tell you," said her father. "It's one of the biggest secrets we have. Here, give it to me." The inspector placed his hand on the blueprint. "No, sir. I think I must take it with me and send a secret messenger to Sir James with it. It wouldn't do to have the only 2 copies in one place." "Take it, then. Take it," said George's father. He glared round at the children. "I still don't understand how you came to possess it," he said. "Sit down, sir, won't you, and listen to their tale," said the inspector. "They've done very well." Julian went through the whole story again, this time in greater detail. The inspector sat up straight when he heard where the gang were, down in the great pit below the Roman camp. "You saw them go down into that pit," he said. "Watched them swing down on the rope. They may be there now." He glanced at his watch. "No, they won't. They'll be gone." "No, they won't," said Julian, his voice rising exultantly. "They'll still be there." "How do you know that?" asked the inspector. "Because I pulled up their rope and took it away," said Julian. "Look, I've got it round me. They can't get out without a rope, and they won't know how to escape any other way." The inspector slapped the table so hard that everyone jumped and the 2 dogs barked. "Good work," he boomed. "I must go at once and send some men out there. I'll let you know what happens." And out he went at a run, the precious blueprint buttoned safely in his pocket. He leapt into the car and roared away at top speed down the lane. Everyone began to talk at the tops of their voices. The twins beamed. They liked this jolly family and the adventurous life they seemed to lead. They thought it would be even more fun when cook arrived with a truly wonderful meal. "Homemade veal and ham pie," said Dick. "Stuffed tomatoes, and what a salad! Joan, you're a marvel." Soon they were all sitting down enjoying themselves and talking over their adventure. Just as they were finishing, the telephone rang. Julian went to answer it. He came back looking thrilled. "That was the inspector," he said. "They've got all the gang. When they got to the pit, one of the men called up for help. Said some idiot of a boy or some hoaxer must have taken their rope away. So the police, all in plain clothes, so that of course the 3 men suspected nothing, let down a rope, and up came the gang one by one." "And were arrested as soon as they popped out of the hole, I suppose?" "The inspector's awfully pleased with us," said Julian, "and so is Sir James Lawton Harrison too, apparently. We're to get a reward. Very hush-hush, though. We mustn't say anything about it. There's to be something for each of us." Julian looked round at Timmy. "Well, I can see what old Timmy ought to ask for," he said. "A new cardboard collar. He's scratching his ear to bits." George screamed and rushed to bend over Timmy. She lifted a woebegone face. "Yes, he's scratched so hard he's made his ear bad again. Oh, Timmy, you really are a fat-headed dog. Mother, Mother, Timmy's messed up his ear again." Her mother looked into the room. "Oh, George, what a pity. I told you not to take that collar off till his ear was absolutely healed." "It's maddening," said George. "Now everyone will laugh at him again." "Oh, no, they won't," said Julian, and he smiled at George's scowling face. "Cheer up. It's a very peculiar thing, George. This adventure began with Timmy and a cardboard collar, and bless me if it hasn't ended with Timmy and a cardboard collar. 3 cheers for Timmy." "Yes, 3 cheers for old Timmy. Get your ear well before the next adventure, Tim. You really can't wear a cardboard collar again."